Grading papers. Does the sound of that just make your skin crawl just a little bit? It's the hardest part of teaching, I swear, right? Grading papers takes so much of our time as middle school English teachers. But I'm gonna talk to you about 3 things that you can do right now that are gonna change the game for you when it comes to grading your students' essays. I'm telling you, I'm gonna get you to a point where you can grade an essay in like 5 or 6 minutes maximum, while still giving your students a ton of incredible feedback that's going to help them grow as writers. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, the first thing that you want to do, number 1, is, boom, use an effective rubric. So not just any old rubric, but a rubric that really speaks into the different skills that you want your students to be working on as they're improving in their writing. So don't worry, I'm gonna do a part of this video here in just a second where I'm gonna actually grade a paper with you using this exact rubric so you can see exactly what it looks like. And the key with the rubric is that it does the work for you. You will see that I will circle, underline certain things in order to show students what's working, what's not working, as opposed to writing comments all over their paper, which is tedious and takes a ton of time. So when I get to that section of the video, it's gonna be hugely helpful to watch me grade a paper so you know exactly how to utilize a rubric effectively. So key number 1, you gotta use an effective rubric. That is the baseline. You absolutely have to have this as a part of your essay grading repertoire, if you will. Step number 2, this one might make you angry. Stop leaving feedback on your students' papers. Let me tell you why. When you leave feedback all over your students' essays, do they actually read it? 9 times out of 10, no. Is it a complete waste of your time? 9 times out of 10, yes. Do they actually use that feedback to improve in their writing? 9 times out of 10, they don't. Of course, there's always going to be that student that does, but we want to make sure as teachers that the work that we are putting forth into leaving feedback for our students actually helps move them forward in their writing. We don't want to leave comments in vain. So stop leaving feedback on your students' papers. And when I grade the sample essay for you, you'll see what I do instead. So I'm not leaving comments all over their essay. I'm using the rubric to do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. And I'm leaving a very small piece of feedback. I always kind of put it at the bottom of the rubric, like my overall feedback, 1 or 2 sentences. And again, when I dive into that part of the video, which is here in just a moment, you'll see exactly what that looks like. All right, before we dive into me actually showing you how I would grade a paper step by step, and step number 3, which is integral to your success in helping your students grow as writers and also not taking a ton of your time, definitely subscribe to our channel so you can get more middle school English tips like this one. All right, let's go ahead and dive into me actually showing you how I would grade an essay, and then we'll circle back after that to talk about step number 3, which will round us out for how to effectively grade essays faster while still getting your students' scores to go up.
All right, so let's take a look at an actual essay together. So let's say I am simply going to start with a key. I want to make sure that my students know that if I circle something, it means good, and if I underline something, it's going to need improvement. So as I'm quickly reading through their introduction, I'm going to underline things that they did a good job on. I'm going to circle things that need improvement. I'm just leaving like quick little marks for them and not a ton of comments at all. I'm putting brackets around things that need improvement, etc. Well, then I'm going to go back to my rubric and I'm going to circle where my student did really well. And then I'm going to underline the area in which the student needs to improve. Here you can see it's the claim, right? And so the language from the rubric is directly letting them know why they got the grade that they did, which in this case is a 4 on their introduction for those 2 specific reasons. Well, then I'm going to go back to my student's essay and I'm going to read the body paragraph. I'm going to do the same exact thing, underline things that they did well. I'm going to circle things that need improvement, and I'm really leaving very few marks on their actual paper. I might put brackets or like call attention to a specific part, like in this case, the justification doesn't quite make sense. And then I'm going to go back to my rubric and I'm going to use the rubric to tell my student what went well and what didn't go well. So here, the student had great evidence and I'm going to let them know that. Great job, right? Circle that. And they're going to get a 5 on that particular portion of the evidence. Well, then the justification, they didn't do that great of a job. And here they got a 3 and my rubric is telling them why they got a 3 in that particular case. Now what I can do is I can add up my students' grades for the introduction, the evidence, as well as the justification. So I kind of know where they stand. Like, where is this paper going at this point in terms of the grade that they will be receiving? And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grade the conclusion and use the last two parts of the rubric. So here, I'm reading their conclusion and I'm going to be pretty honest with them. And that's because that's going to help them grow, right? And we have a great relationship. They understand what to expect from me. This isn't anything new from them. So I'm going to go back to my rubric. I'm going to let them know why they're getting the grade that they did for organization. And that's because, you know what, their conclusion wasn't that great and their transitions weren't that awesome. They could have done a better job there. So I'm going to give them a 3.5 in this case because they did a decent job with the conclusion, but they needed improvement there. Then for the last part of the rubric, I'm going to be looking at the mechanics and their formatting. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to look through my comments. What did I circle? What did I underline? What areas did they really struggle with in terms of mechanics and format? I'm going to use my rubric again to show students exactly what happened, why they got the grade that they did, and fill in that particular point. Then I'm going to add everything up. I'm going to get my total for this particular student's essay. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to leave some detailed comments on the student's actual paper. So I am going to let them know, hey, this is what you did really well with. I'm super impressed that, you know, you've been improving in your writing. However, I am noticing, you know, these other things, etc. And in this way, they're getting very clear, very direct feedback, simple feedback to read that they can start to see, oh, you know what, I am improving in this area. However, you know what, I do need to work on this other area. Well, this is super helpful for students because they're not reading through an entire essay, ignoring your comments. They know exactly the areas that they need to improve upon and why, because I've underlined them on the rubric. And now they're going to use the student reflection page to really reflect themselves on why they got the grade that they did, which is what we'll get into right now.
All right, now that we've graded a student's paper, we want to have them reflect on their own writing. So step number 3, in addition to the first 2 steps that I've already mentioned, is to use a student response to literature reflection handout. And I'm going to move this a little bit closer to you so you can see exactly what it looks like. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to grade students' papers using my rubric, right? Giving them the feedback with the rubric doing the work for me. And then I'm going to give them their rubric back that's graded, their essay back that's graded, and a student reflection sheet. Because I want them to really go back into the essay and evaluate themselves. How did they do? How did they do? But I'm looking for it in a much more meaningful, intentional way. So I'll share with you the questions that we have on our student reflection sheet so you can make your own. So the first thing that we want students to do is we want them to identify one area where they feel successful. What did they do well? Because if they did something well, we want them to do it again, right? And then we want them to explain why. Why were you successful in this area? They can't just say my claim was great. Okay, but why was your claim great? We're looking for the why. And guess what's happening here? They're practicing justification as well, right? Totally tricking them into writing even more. I love it. Number 2, the other thing that we want students to do, in addition to identifying one thing that they did well, is what's one area, just one area of improvement that they need to make in their response to literature. And again, why, right? So an area of success, an area for improvement, both explaining why. If we have them focus on tons of different things that need to be improved, it's gonna be hard to improve all of those things. But if they can find one area of focus and really nail down into that, it's gonna be a lot more meaningful for them. The other thing that we're going to have them do in the next part of the student reflection sheet is we want them to pick 2 sentences from their essay or their response to literature, and we want them to rewrite those sentences to make them stronger. Perhaps here they're adding vocabulary words, or they're making a simple sentence into a compound complex sentence, etc. Essentially showing them, you got to enhance your writing. Let's pick maybe your 2 weakest sentences. How could we have made them better? And we're going to do that in that section of the student reflection sheet. And then the very last thing that we're having students do at the very bottom is explain what strategies you used to make your writing stronger. So that's the very last thing that we have students do on the student reflection sheet. So for example, they might say, you know what? I used a thesaurus to change 3 words throughout my paper to be stronger, more highly academic vocabulary terms, right? They maybe changed said to articulated, and that made their writing more precise. So again, 3 ways to improve students' writing but drastically cut down on grading. Use an effective rubric. Have the rubric do the work for you. You want one that looks like this, right? It has all the language there for you, and you can grade it just like how I showed you in the video. So use an effective rubric. Step number 2 is to stop leaving comments all over your students' papers. It's not helpful. It's not helpful for you. It's not helpful for them. Let the rubric do the work for you. And then step number 3 is to use that student reflection sheet for their response to literature or their essay, where they're really hyper-focused on one area of improvement, but also the things that they did well. We want to give them that confidence boost so many of our students need when it comes to writing. All right, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in one of our other videos.